in my free time, I'm an amateur filmmaker, so we were filming a little sci-fi project that I'm still working on, um, and won't plug. It's fine, but
Go ahead and plug it, bro.
well, it's about portals, coincidentally. So it's a project I'm working on called Crusader 15, and it's essentially this story of um, a portal traveler who ends up accidentally finding these portals. And every time he goes through one, the portal closes and he's trapped on the other side.
Mm.
But at the same time, he loses a little piece of himself every time a portal closes. So, long story short, he ends up going through all of these portals trying to get back to where he originally started, and he's losing himself along the way until there's basically nothing left of him. It's kind of a tragic tale, but it's something that I'm working on. And we went to my parents' property to film basically the first chapter of it.
Mm-hmm.
My brother AJ was my main my lead, my crusader, and I also had my other brother Jonah and our family friend Andy working with us, helping me out with the gear, and my brother Jonah was also acting in it. So my parents' property, the way that it is it's way out in the country, surrounded by cornfields, like most of Wisconsin. But their house is on top of a hill, and the hill slopes down to the banks of the Fox River, which is a good sized river. You can put a boat on it. Like it's a decent sized river, and they have river frontage, and everything between the river and their house on this hill is forest. So this was going to be a great setting for the film that we were making, and we were also going to see them and hang out and whatever. We hadn't seen them in a while since we were in Milwaukee. And we had completed a few days of recording, 3 or 4 days. And to fast forward a little bit through all the monotonous stuff, we got to the point where we were done and it was nighttime. Everybody in the house had gone to bed. So it was just me, AJ, Jonah, and Andy hanging out in the woods at night. After we had cleaned up all the gear and everything, we were just chopping it up like we do, just some friends in the woods. And for part of this film, we had built this structure in the forest, and we called it the tabernacle. And it's basically this gigantic teepee type structure, and the walls are all logs and big sticks, and it's dug into the side of the hill. So half of it is literally the hill, and the rest are these sticks and logs, and it's big enough that we could all fit in there and have a fire in there as well. And so we were hanging out and just talking. And because of the weather in Wisconsin, it's kind of brisk outside when we were doing this. And inside, it would get really hot because of the fire. So we would occasionally go out to cool off, get some air. The smoke, the way that the thing was built, the structure kind of held in some of the smoke. So like to get some air and stuff, we would go out occasionally. And there was this one instance where Andy and Jonah were sitting in the tabernacle, and AJ and I stepped out to get some air. And, all of us were, except Andy, but God bless him, but we're all woods kids. We've all spent our whole lives growing up in the woods. We didn't have electronics growing up, so we were always, my parents homeschooled us, and we were always living sort of a back to the basics kind of lifestyle. So we grew up in the woods. We're comfortable in the woods at night. We camp a lot, and so we didn't have any flashlights. We weren't armed. We didn't have any we didn't think we needed that kind of stuff, right? And so we're stepping out and to get some air, and we're just talking, and all of a sudden off in the distance, there's a sound, and it doesn't sound like much, just some rustling leaves and a snap of a twig. And for anybody who's spent any time in the woods, that's not a big mystery. It's probably an animal. My parents have foxes that live on their property. There's a deer trail that walks right along the river in these woods. And there's constantly like raccoons and possums and coyotes and all sorts of stuff roaming around down there. So we're not really scared. but,
Mhm.
but we're kind of like, you know, what is that? That's a natural reaction. It's just like, did you hear that? And so AJ kind of, he looks over at me and he's like, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, I heard it. And we kind of zone in on it, and we kind of sit down on our haunches to lower um our frame and kind of hide ourselves against the hill. But the fire is behind us, so the way that it is, we are between whatever the thing that made the sound, wherever that is, and the fire. So it can see us most likely, but we try to make ourselves small and continue to listen. And sure enough, it starts up again. And we tell the boys to, be quiet and come out here and see if you can see this thing. And they kind of creep out. And we all just hear this literal walking, like a bipedal walk. And we knew it was bipedal because of the way that it was. Like it was very intentional footfalls. It wasn't like the rustling of like a deer walk when it kicks up leaves or anything like that. It was very obvious that this thing was probably bipedal. And so we just sat there and we all listened. We waited. Maybe we would see it come into the firelight or something like that. It did sound far enough away that we might not see it in the firelight, though. So after we didn't really hear anything for a couple seconds, I picked up a stick just off the forest floor and I threw it in that direction because it was very clear that whatever this thing was hadn't moved along. It was right over there in this little area that we had kind of reasoned that this thing was in. And so I threw a stick over there and nothing happened. One of the other boys threw something over there. Again, nothing happened. And then AJ gets out his iPhone and turns on the flashlight. And we all know these flashlights aren't that great. So like it's not piercing the darkness, but it is kind of lighting up a little more than the fire. And we just see, now that we've had time to look back on it, about 35-ish, 40 feet away. And we went back there the next day to kind of count it out. So that's where I get that number from. These eyes illuminate near the forest floor. And I say illuminate, but it's probably the wrong word. It's eyeshine is what it is. And these eyes instantly capture our attention because they're not like other animal eyes that you may have seen in the woods. They're front facing, which is symbolic of predators. Most predators have front facing eyes. And so that's the first thing we noticed, was that the eyes they're facing forward, but they were large. Like they were bigger than our eyes, I would say, bigger than human eyes. And your natural reaction for something like with eyes that big in Wisconsin is going to be deer. That's what it's going to be. But the way that the eyes were positioned, i.e., front facing, and they were about 6 inches apart, like from where we were standing, it looked like you could go up to this thing and you could put your hand in between the eyes, and the eyes, you wouldn't touch both of them. Like it was a large face that these eyes were in. And it was so low to the ground that from an animal that size with front facing eyes, the only thing that I could compare it to was if you were in the woods trying to sneak up on us or something, and you were down in the prone, like sort of like as low to the ground as you could get, with your head, your chin sort of resting on the ground, looking up like this, like looking up the hill at us. And obviously, that kind of triggered us a little bit because it looked like this thing was hiding, like trying to hide. Like it didn't know that we had caught the eyeshine yet. So we freak out. We've got a couple tools. in this shelter that we made. So we have a shovel and we have like a hammer, just basic things that we use for set building. And we're all kind of slowly arming ourselves because even though bears and wolves are uncommon in Wisconsin, especially that far south, you can find them in the Northwoods once in a while, but not really that far south. We There are stories of these rogue animals that sort of like every now and then there's rumors of cougars and stuff that kind of come out, and there's lone cougars that stalk the woods and kill deer and stuff. And so we were preparing for the instance that this was a large predator just in case, and we couldn't scare it away. At this point, we are literally chucking stick after stick. We're all throwing stuff at this thing, and the eyes aren't moving at all. Like, we're not hitting it, and the eyes aren't moving. They're staring straight at us. And then this thing, we can't see the thing itself, but the eyes rise, and it's like this thing stood up, and they get to about 6.5, 7 feet off the ground. So like, we now know this thing is bigger than any of us at a minimum.
Yeah, it's not Bambi.
No, it's not Bambi. And we had hoped that this could be something like a deer raising its head, but we kept going back to just the shape of the eyes and the position of the eyes, the distance apart, the crouch. It didn't make sense for this to be a deer. It was too big to be an animal that could potentially climb a tree like a raccoon or something. So we know that it wasn't a raccoon that scurried up the tree and was now just looking over at us. It wasn't hidden behind the trees because we could see both eyes still just blatantly staring at us. For whatever reason, I decide that I'm going to get a little bit closer, because even though I'm scared, and we're all getting more and more scared as time goes by, and we're throwing and yelling, Jonah's banging his shovel on some logs, just trying to make as much noise as possible at this point. We want this thing to run off. We want any sort of reaction. It's extremely menacing that this thing is just standing there staring, regardless of what we're doing to try to scare it off. And we're not scaring it off. So I go a little bit closer. I go to the bottom of this hill. So I'm now probably 10, 15 feet away from the rest of the boys and from the shelter. And when you go down the hill, it slowly sort of levels out. It's flat for a ways before it slopes again down into the river. And I'm on this sort of the beginning of this flat area, and this creature would be on the other, probably about 20, 25 feet away from me at this point. And I can't see the eyeshine from where I'm at. So the boys still can. They're kind of giving me the play-by-play, and I'm down here in this low area, and I'm literally doing what I've been doing this entire time, and I'm just chucking sticks and rocks because I need something to happen. I need there to be some kind of movement to feel good about trying to get out of the woods, because at this point now that is the goal. Like, we have to get out of the woods. Like it's 2, 3 in the morning. We're down here in the forest. We've been down here for hours. We don't know how long this thing has been down here with us, and we don't know why we can't scare it away. But the goal obviously has to be to put the fire out and get out of the woods. It's time to go home. And in order for that to happen, we need to see some movement out of this thing, right? I'm not just going to turn my back and let this thing have my back. Yeah. So like I throw some sticks, nothing's happening. And AJ at the top of the hill, he's just like, he's telling me that the sticks are landing near the eyes. And Jonah, all of a sudden, he goes, dude, it's staring right at you. And that triggered me in a way where I did, my flight activated, and I just ran back to the boys, and AJ said that as I was running back, the eyes did lower slightly, as if it was like going into a sort of crouch, like almost like
Running stance.
exactly like you trigger a
Mhm.
chase mechanism. He said that there was some sort of movement in the eyes that indicated it was getting ready to pursue, or at least something unexpected had happened and it was going to brace for whatever that was. But I'm with you. I think it was more like a running stance chase mechanism that may have been subtly activated in this thing. And at the same time, I didn't hear this, but Jonah, Andy's freaking out. Again, God bless the kid, but he's getting ready to hide out. He goes back in the shelter, which is pretty sturdy. I mean, we had some faith in it, but he goes back in. Jonah and him are starting to try to put the fire out, because even in this situation, we're not going to leave a fire just going in the woods. So like they're trying to put the fire out because we're going to get out of here now. And AJ says that while I was running back, he heard a sound come from the thing, and he said it was sort of a cross between a hiss and like a low rumbling growl.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear it. Granted, I was running through the underbrush, so I didn't hear that. But he said that the sound was it was menacing enough that he felt like we were in danger at that point. At that point, if we didn't already feel like this was a hazard to us, this now was dangerous. This does seem to be some kind of predator. It does have a sort of hiss, growl sound to it. It's big, front-facing eyes, and it's fully aware of what we're doing and appears to know what we're trying to do too, which is scare it off, and it's just not scared. So as I'm running back to the boys, I'm going to help them put the fire out and get our last things, because we still have a couple items down there, like camera gear and stuff. We're going to grab all this up. We decided that the best thing to do at this point is to not really split up, but we're going to scatter across the hill and all go up on our own.
Why?
So the reason that we decided this was the best idea is, first of all, we were horrified, but we felt like this thing was more, we felt like if we weren't in a group, it would be harder to get us. I don't know what our logic was.
All at the same time, sure.
Right. So the way this hill is, this structure that we built is kind of built into this hill, and the hill is, it's maybe a 45-degree angle hill.
Mm.
So like you're pawing the earth when you're climbing up this hill. It's loose dirt, it's decaying leaves, it's logs, it's thorns, it's brush. And we don't go far apart from each other, but we're probably, there's 10, 15 feet in between each of us. And we're each kind of going up directly behind through the undergrowth in these kind of random directions, just to get to the top of the hill, because at the top of the hill is an open field and there's no forest whatsoever at the top of the hill. It just opens up into this field, and then we would run along the tree line to get to my parents' house. So we each took our own sort of shortest route up this hill. We get to the field, and this is all triggered by the fact that as I was running up towards AJ to get all his gear, he took his phone away from, like, he stopped shining the light accidentally to sort of like reach out to help me get up the hill. And when he did that, he took the light off the eyes. When he scanned back, there were no more eyes.
Mm.
But we didn't hear anything flee. We didn't hear anything running, moving, and of any type, but when he scanned back to try to find the eyes again after helping me up this hill, they weren't there. And it's very like horror movie, right? Like it's just now we don't know where this thing is, but we heard it approach. So logic tells me that we would hear it leave or do anything, and we didn't. So that's what triggered our retreat up the hill and back into the parents' house, and that's sort of the end of the actual experience.